Morning. Kumlen Abalak Gemara. Today, Thursday, Gemara is Daf Ayin Dalad. We are up to right in the middle of the page. So we had in our Mishnah, Rab Shimon is of the view that even though the mincha of Koyanim, minchas chaytif, a Koyan commit a sin, even though the entire thing is burned in Mizbeach, you still require kmitza. You still have to scoop the three fingers, and you just make two separate fires. It places two separate parts on the Mizbeach. Tanya, right in the middle of the page, the last line is Tanya. Tanya, do live in another brisa. Rabbi Shimon says, Minchas Choyte Shel Koinim, we're specifically talking about the mincha that a kohen who sinned brings, the voluntary carbon of a mincha, which entirely gets burnt on the Mizbeach. Rabbi Shimon agrees, you don't do kmitza. The entire thing gets burnt. It's only the Minchas Choyte. So he says, the minchas chayt of kainim require a kmitza. V'hakayim is kara bifnei atzma. The kaim is brought up on its own. V'shalayim kevin atzma. So too, the balance of the mincha is brought on its own. That's Rab Shimon. His son, Rabbi Elazar, but Rab Elazar Shimon says he agrees with his father, but he disagrees. He agrees that you do kmitza. He agrees you put the kmitza on his mizbeach, but what do you do with the balance? According to Rab Shimon, you place it on the mizbeach. According to Rabbi Elazar, his son, you do something else. What do you do? He said, you bring the korban on its own, you know, do Shnayim, you scatter it on the base hadeshin. On the base hadeshin. The way in Ashi and Gemara learns the base hadeshin is, so we're just learning here what we learned yesterday. That Shimon says that the mincha of a kohen, a sinner, you do the kmitza. You still do kmitza, even though the entire thing is burned in the mizbeach. But he said you put the kmitza on one part of the mizbeach and the balance on the other. Not like the Tanakama says the whole thing is burned in the mizbeach. Why bother doing kmitza? But Daf Ayin Dalet, right in the middle of the page we left off yesterday, which is study. And his son Rabbi Elazar said, I agree with my father, but I say that what you do with the balance of the mincha is that you don't just put it in the mizbeach to burn it. You throw it on the heap of ashes. Now there were a few base hadeshes. There's one right next to the ramp to the kevish. There's one somewhere else, and one on the Harabayis, and there's one outside of Yerushalayim. With the chatzah primus, you bring outside Yerushalayim. The way Rashi now Gemara learns is it's the one near the kevish. Tesis understood in Rashi that it's the one outside Yerushalayim. But the Gemara right in Daf Ayin Dalet Aleph, the first word of the line is what was Tanya. We're a few lines down. Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon says, right in the middle of the page. He says, I agree with my father. So we bring the korban zone. Shiraim is passing base hadesh. What you do with the shiraim? You place it all over the base hadesh, and you toss it over the house, place of ashes. Rabbi is trying to understand base hadesh and hecha. Which base hadesh was Rabbi Elazar referring to? Either the Maila, because on the Melech also you had a little area there where you had the ashes. Yeah, I know. So then he agrees with his father. You place the shiraim on the mizbeach as well. What's he arguing about? Where exactly in the mizbeach he put it? And either lamata, if he meant down the bottom, yeshlav dovash shekarav lamata. The base of is the place where you throw out things which are possible. Here you tell me this is the chatchila, the carbon. What do you do with the mincha sinner of the mincha's chayt of a kohen, the kmitz on his beach, and you throw out in the base of in the bottom? Who we throw out a carbon? Amalei Baba dilmali ibud. But yeah, maybe that's the avodah. You throw it out and you to destroy it. Achikola, everyone laughed. The chiyesh of dovash shekarav but where do you find a carbon? You throw it away. And that's part of the process of a carbon, klapnisht. Tanya, but Ravu, so Ravu, the father of Alvin came along and said, it says in Pasuk, Kol, we just learned it, Kol minchas koyin, the mincha of a koyin, kolu, tia, should be completely burnt. Lo yiseh achel, you shouldn't eat it. So what does it mean? So we say lahachila hikashtia v'lo ledavar acher. So he says over here, that I'm comparing it to eating and not to anything else. What does that have to do with anything? Mike Armag, what exactly is he trying to explain here? What is he trying to explain? What's that we're trying to say? In other words, you're asking over here, where do you find a precedent that you throw something away? So he brings his pasuk as if somehow or not this answers the question. That the minchas chaytis compared to other minchas regarding eating, that you don't get eaten, but not regarding whether you throw it away or not. How does exactly answer the question? My comment. How do you learn that? So have a Abaye and Rav. Abaye says this is what he's trying to say, that even though it's similar to a mincha that you have a kmitza, but all other minchas either eat the balance, whatever it is. Here you're going to throw it away. How do you see that? All right, how's it coming? This is what he's saying here. You're taking the pasuk and you're going to take the last two words of the pasuk and you're going to put it to the front part of the pasuk. Even though the pasuk says one pasuk, it says only one thing. It says over here that v'chol minchas koyin sounds like you're talking about one mincha of a koyin. Kol tiyah lo. We're going to learn. We're talking about two different minchas. There's the minchas chayte and the minchas nadava. And we're going to like this. Kol minchas koyin. The mincha of a koyin is he's talking about minchas chayve. You go to the last two words lo achel. You don't eat it. And then that's talking about chayvase. And then when the pasuk says kol tiyah should be completely burned, isn't it vase? So they're completely burnt on mizbeach and the dava. But you don't do that with the minchas chayte. A minchas chayte you just don't eat. But what do you do with it? You throw it in the base of deshin. He takes out a sharp knife and divided pasuk. You took the last words of the pasuk and put it in the front of the pasuk and skipped the middle. I agree with you in sentiment, but not the way you learned it. Kol minchas koyin. I agree. It's two minchas. Kol minchas koyin. Read the pasuk in order. Kol tiyah should be completely burned. That's talking about nidvase. That's what you do with the korban adava. You put the whole thing on the mizbeach. Then the last part is lo you say ochel. The only thing is you don't eat it, but you don't put it on the mizbeach. The balance that's chayvase. Instead, you throw it in the base hadeshin. How do you know which one goes in the mizbeach and which one you throw out? Which one do we compare to all the other menachos? Is what is l'chayda similar? Is dafka the minchas adava? Why does that make more sense? That it should have the same din as the chavisin. That there's no commitment else because it's similar chavisin. Which one is to Cain to Dita? Because this, first of all, it's three things. First of all, it's common. Minchas adava is very common. People donate all the time. And nothing to do with sin, just like minchas chavitin of kohen gadol, yeah. And basim recha, you give the Eibusher recha chayach. What do you call it? However, what do you basim recha? Because you put oil to it, you add levina to it. A minchas chayte does not have any oil, doesn't have any levina. You should have included the chayva should be similar to the chavitin rather than the dova. And first of all, the measure the same amount. On a dova, you can give up to 60 Australian. Right, but here there's only one isan, and chayv they're both mandatory. It's 3-2. But Rabbanon. So now we ask a question. According to Rabbanon, high kol minchas koyin kol tiyah loisa ocham avdilei l'chayla. If the Torah says you got to burn the whole thing, obviously you don't have to eat it. So what Rav Shimon is, we're talking about two different kabbalas. There's one set of rules by minchas chayte, one minchas dava. But when you Rabbanon hold it's all the same, you burn the whole thing. There's no kimitza whether it's chayte or king. Why does the Torah say burn the whole thing? Don't eat it. Obviously, if it's burnt, you can't eat it. What's the point? The Bible telling me for the following: all we know is the Elyon, the chavisin that has to get good. What we spoke about before, the chavisin of the kohen is ein Elyon bechol. You have to burn it. To bechol you have to burn the whole thing. The tachtoine and the mincha of a regular kohen is only loisa achel. You shouldn't eat. So here you have and I say to burn the whole thing. Here you have a lav loisa achel. I know that is good. That both of them have both in yonim. The mitzvah of burning the whole thing and the loises of loisachel. So therefore we have two. Why is the word kolil? Kolil by minchas kohen kolil tia, and then when it says the minchas chavisim by the kohen gadol, it says over there also kolil tikta. Because they show that whatever is the loisachel here applies to there, and kol tia and what applies there, kolil tikta applies here as well. So good. Sorry?
What's the Elyon at the time?
It's one pasuk apart from each other. So Elyon, the pasuk before says Komichas Kohen Kol Tir, the next pasuk says Minchas Chavisin. Tell you what about it. What do you call it? You burn the whole thing. I've come to go tikta. So to about Minchas Kohen, regular Kohen, you burn the whole thing. Well, Makan here says Loisa Achel, says Achilose. Aflahal also by Minchas Chavisin of Kohen Gadol, Litin Loisa Achilose. That's an interesting question. What about a koyin in a mood in every carbon? What happens to the fats that goes in the mizbeach? So, and anything which a koyin cannot do, he's treated like a zor, like a yisro. For this, if he's not wearing his clothes, he's like a zor. So, koyin she'achal min amurin. If a koyin ate from the fats, mahu. What would the din be in this case? Lav the Zor is, of course, he's a Zor, because it says a Zor should not eat it. And since it belongs to Mizbeach, even the Kohen is considered a Zor. Look at Bailey. That's not a question. My question is, Lav the Kolotia. Does he also have the Lav of Kolotia?
That's completely.
In other words, when the Torah says by Manachos Kolol, the whole thing should be burned, is that only limited to Manachos, or anything which is meant to be burnt on the Mizbeach comes under the Kolol Tikta and Loisa Achel? And therefore the Kohen will be over that Aveda as well. My Omar Rab Aaron. Now this is interesting. There's this fun talk about how come we don't have Amoraim that have Hebrew names. All the Amoraim have these Aramaic names. Now one Amoraim is called Moshe, and this is like the only one called Aaron. We have a Mordechai.
There's a Yaakov also.
Yaakov have plenty. Tanoim. We have a Yitzchak, Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak. We have, but very, very few. But Aaron, this is an Islam, a Zoltan thing, and I can't remember. They tried to explain what it is, because the Madame Shik made a whole thing that you have to go by Yiddish names. And in fact, the name Shik is Shem Yisrael Kodesh. That's why the family is called Shik. And one of the dilemmas is that the Amoraim across the board all had Goyish names. Anyway, Rab Aaron, remember this Rab Aaron if you hear him now. My Omar Rab Aaron Ravina Toshma coming Daniel Rab Lazar Rab Kosher who the Kolotia anything where the mitzvah is to burn his Mizbeach gets the Isa of Loisa Achel that's written over there by Kolotikter. So the Emurim have to be burnt in Mizbeach. You get the Isa of Loisa Achel. Mishnah Minchas Koinim, the Mincha of Koinim. Minchas Koyin Mashiach, Minchas Nasach, and the Mincha you bring along with your kabbanas, the Mizbeach, they all go on the Mizbeach. The Koyin have nothing in it. Ubezeh Yafak Mizbeach, the Koyin, the Mizbeach gets more than the Koyin. They have lechem, a lechem aponim, the 2 loaves of bread for Shavuos, and the lechem aponim, ne'acholin the Koyin, they are given the Koyin, eat them, and they consume it entirely. The Mizbeach, and the Mizbeach gets nothing. Ubezeh Yafak Koyin Mizbeach, here the Koyin get better than Mizbeach. Says the Gemara, the 2 lekha, these are only cases where you a carbon oil, the entire thing goes in Mizbeach and not to the Kohanim. That's not true. Ika oira, the hide of the animals go to the Kohanim. We're talking about cases where 100% goes onto the Mizbeach. Where you go oila sa'if, the bird gets entirely burned in the Mizbeach. Ika moira nuts, the parts of the bird, the feathers, all that don't go to the Mizbeach. But Ika the Sachim. What about the libations that go with the carbon? The Shisin of the Sachim, they go down the chutes, and they don't go onto the fire of the Mizbeach. And we're talking about the Mizbeach. My bazu. True, but it doesn't go Mizbeach either. We don't consider that Mizbeach. When we say Mizbeach, we mean the surface Mizbeach where the fires are. Nobody gets it. When you say bazu here and not something else, what are you trying to exclude?
Carbonates.
That's the one who holds that H. That's true. But you get ashes, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. Good question. But that's not everyone holds that the carbonates as a carbon. But that'd be umay bazu. This and not what. To negate the view of Shmuel. What does Shmuel say? He said if somebody donates wine to the Beis Hamikdash, he says it goes to the Mizbeach. He says if you're right, in the Sachim that go with the carbon, you pour down the chutes. But if I donate wine to the Mizbeach, according to Shmuel, it goes on top of the Mizbeach. Says the Mishnah, no. Nothing else goes on top of the Mizbeach alone. That even that kind of wine goes down the sheets. On the other hand, Misayel Shmuel is a proof to other din of Shmuel. Shmuel said, Hamisnad of Shemin, that's wine. But if somebody donates oil to the Mizbeach, he says, you actually take a kaimitz off it, and of oil, he doesn't know how you do it, and you put that on the Mizbeach, and Vishiyarim Necholin, and Balgarit, and that's why the Mishnah doesn't mention it, because it is divided equally between the Kayin and the Mizbeach. Good question. How you practically do it, basically.
If you put in cold temperature, oil becomes like a
yeah, okay, that could be. Maybe, yeah. Actually, leave in the fridge, it becomes... There's no more that goes entirely to the Kayin, the Chatas Oif goes entirely to Kohen. The blood of the Chatas Oif goes on Mizbech. So it's not 100% to the Kohen, not like the Shtel Lechem. But the oil of the Mitzvah, where they pour on the lobe, earlobes and all that. No, you also have to spray. But that all goes, so that's considered, it's not to the Mizbech. It's going to, but the blood goes on Mizbech. My bazu, so he said, what's bazu? La fuki man do'ama, that this is to negate the view that says, shtei halechem haboy b'fnei atzma. There's one view that says that if the shtei halechem come with the two lambs, then you eat the shtei halechem. But if you didn't have the two lambs with it, just the shtei halechem, li sereifa asyan. What happens to them is that they get completely burnt on the mizbech. This is where that's what he says. No, that we don't agree with that opinion. That even in the shtei halechem, always it goes to the kohenim. They get to eat it. No, but you don't say he goes to Sreifa, but he goes to the Kainim. Next Mishnah. This is how it works. Every mincha that you put in a keli, every mincha that goes into a keli, is not that goes straight in the oven. You put a little bit of oil in the keli, then you put in flour, and some say you put water in then a little bit later, and then you put in more oil and you mix the stir all together. And then when you finally bake it's finished, you pour a little bit of oil on top. 3 stages. So the Olam Menachos, Hanas is Bikli, 2 in the Shloshim Matanos, 3 stages. Shemen Yitzika, which actually is the last stage, that's the oil you pour on top. Ubelila, which is the middle stage, and a Matan Shemen Bikli, Koid Mazirsim. I'm not sure why the Mishnah reverses the order. And the little bit of oil you put in the keli in the first instance. What about the palace? What about the chalus? If it's you have chalus and the kicking over there by Minchas Maifa, what do you do there? Boil and everybody holds. Wait until they become chalus, and then you stir in oil and you mix it together. Rebbe himself later on changed his mind. Not him, interceptor. Divrei Rebbe, Chama say no. Even the chalus, first of all, soilus. So first of all, it has to be the first stage, which is flour. That's when you mix the oil in. How can you mix it once it's already baked? So you do that. There's chalos and kicking. Chalos, you put in enough oil and you mix it together. The question is whether you mix it while it's flour or you mix it once it's bread. And if it's bread, what you do is you break it up in a bunch of small pieces and then you mix it, like Rebbe says. Or the kicking, but the kicking requires mashich, a little bit of oil smeared on top. Kates and Moshe, what do you mean a little bit of oil smeared on top? Kamin ki, like the Greek key. And there's so many opinions that we'll see. I'll tell you when we finish the Gemara. And then the balance gets eaten by the kohenim. We're talking about the oil. What do you do with the leftover oil? The leftover oil goes to the kohenim. Says the Gemara, Lamuti Mai, what's it coming to exclude? He says all the menachas that are made in a keli, and not what? The mincha that you put straight into the oven, that mincha there is you don't have all these 3 stages. And you don't, which one don't you have? You don't have, but you still have to prepare it. You don't have the yitzika that comes in at the end. Tell them I learned. You only have 2 stages. Tell them I learned. Mincha marcheshes karboncha. It says in the pasuk that if your mincha is a marcheshes, it says soilus b'shem matasa. Right? You put oil into the flour, and if the mincha is all machves, then karboncha, then soil belul b'shemen. Then you have to mix the soilus. So those minchas machesh, it says soilus b'shemetasa. You put the soilus into the oil. That's how you know there's a little bit of oil in the pot in the keli, and then you put flour in. Mincha machmas, it says soilus belul b'shemen. You stir, you mix it together. So we learn this. You put the oil, the flour into the oil. That's the oil in the keli. And then we have karboncha l'gzeida shava. So no, but you have machesh. The next pasuk it says karboncha. There doesn't say in the keli. We'll make it gzeida shava. Ma kan matashem in the keli. Av kolahal mashem l'keli. Over here you put the oil in the kli. Over here also you put the oil in the kli. Umalahal and yitzika, and just like over there, you have to have yitzika. You have to put oil on top. Because it says by Minchas Machwas, it says Kabbalah Belula B'Shemen Matzati, and there it says you have oil, Belula, you have Belula and you have Yitzika, so you have 2 more stages, and we'll use that to bring to B'Cham Macheshes. So you learn Machesh, you learn you have a little oil in the keli, and from Machwas you learn you have to have the other 2 stages put together. Is Avkan Yitzika Belula. Over here also you have Yitzika Belula. Then the Mishnah continues. Chalos. What happened, chalas? According to Rebbe, boilam. After it became a challah, you break it into small pieces, and that's when you stir the oil into it. And the chacham say, no, the stage before soilus. We learned, it says in the pasuk, soilus belula. It says by machmas, soilus belula b'Hashem. Melamich and ivleles soilus. That what? That you mix it up while it's a stage of flour. When even though it's talking about machvas, we're assuming this applies to all the menachos. That wow, that is at the stage of soilus is when you mix the oil in. Rebbe says no. When it comes to the chalas, is chalas boilish neman, because it says in another pasuk, it says if you bring a minchas mafa, it says there is it says chalas matzah belul b'shemen or the kikim matzah meshucha b'shemen. So by chalas matzah it says belulis. It's already called chalas. In other words, after the stage of being baked already. Hold on a second. If you're going to be dying from the word chalas, by lach meitoida never behind there, it says the same thing. It says there by if you're toida, you bring it, and you should bring chalas matzahs b'lu b'shemen. You have 10 chalas of b'lu b'shemen. The efshel boiler, it's impossible you'll agree with us, there it's impossible, because you can have 10 chalas, and the Gemara will explain in a minute, more ask why is it impossible. It's impossible because you only have a little bit of oil. That little bit of oil is impossible to mix into so many loaves, and once already done. It's impossible. Even though it's a little bit of oil, but you can mix it with the flour. Is ketzad oisis. So what's the process? According to Chachamim, noisa shem bekli kain masas. A little bit of oil in the keli, benoisna, and then you put the flour in. Benoisa shem rela. Then you put oil on top of that. Do boil it. That's stage 2, and you stir it, and you put warm water in as well. The lasha you knead it. The oifa you bake it, and upoitisa. And then you break it up because it says michas pitim. You have to break it up. Or pasisa oisa. We'll see later. As a pasas oisa pitim, you have to break it up. The noisna, and then you put a little bit of this called tzika. You put oil on top. The kaimus to do the kmitza. That's Chacham. Rebbe says chalas boilan. According to Rebbe, how is it done practically speaking? You say that in the case of milchas mai for chalos, you have to bake it and then you break into some more.
Do the kmitza after you bake it?
Yeah, that's true. It's one of the hard things to do. You have to always. No. You have milchas soilus flour. Only say it. But the milchas mai is after you bake, you break it up in pieces and then you do kmitza. In fact, we'll have a machlekes later. If you only break it up when you do kmitza, what about those things that you don't do kmitza? Do you still break it up? According to Shimon, no. The two are dependent on each other. So Rebbe says chalos boila. Rebbe says chalos b'lu b'shem. In case I said, what do you do? Nois Hashem b'kli. I agree. You put a little bit of oil in the keli. Kedem lasiyas before you do it. V'noisna. You put the flour in. V'losha. You knead it. You put water in as well. A little bit of warm water. We knead it. V'oifa. You bake it. Upoitzi. Break it up. Then v'noisa l'Hashem in a boil, and then you stir in the oil and you mix it together. And then you put a little bit more on top, and then you do the kmitza. Says the Gemara, and what was the Chacham's taina to Rebbe? They said it's impossible by chalos toida. Why is it impossible? Chase's gisa was the Gemara says shapikam l'Rabbanan, that Rabbanan actually are right, because in fact Rebbe later in the rise said Rebbe was moided to the Rabbanan. And then we asked, well, what do they mean with that strong refutation? Why is it possible by chalos toida any more than mikvah? I'm not sure the V is shemini, because by chalos toida is very little oil. You have 10 chalos. How in the world is that little bit of oil going to be able to be mixed with all these chalos? Okay, chalos to the blue. So what he said was the chalos require mixing, and the kikin require v'shicha, and the kikin require a bit of oil on top. We're just going to go to the Mishnah. Tell them what we learned. Chalos are mixed together. The later kick it. It says in pasuk. The chalos. It says in pasuk there. Soiles chalos matzahs belul b'shemen. So the chalos are mixed, and then it says the kiki matzahs mishuchim b'shemen. You put oil on top. So the Rabbanan says challah belul below the kikin. Only the chalos get all mixed up, and not the kikin. Below the kikin belul. Sheyochla. I would have without the pasuk. What would I have thought? But the dinu l'chayda makes sense. Mad the chalos she'ain tunas mashicha, because it says later on the pasuk mashicha is only by the kikin. So in other words, the chalos don't need mashicha. You know, it's one step less, and yet tunas belila require mixing. So l'chayda the kikin she'tunin mashicha, the kikin which the Torah calls the mashicha. You would say whatever chalos has, you do by the kikin plus. In addition to the belila, it says chalos belula. So it emphasizes only the chalos are bowl. You mix the oil in below the kikin belula. They don't get mixed in. Then the pasuk says the kikin meshuchim. The kikin you put oil on top. Below the chalos, and we infer, but not the chalos get the oil on top. I would have thought. In common sense, the kikin. We already established that you don't mix any oil in; you just pour a little bit oil on top. So chalos, which is stricter. You have to put oil into the mincha itself and mix it together. And then surely you need. So therefore, we learn that each pasuk is very particular. Only this and not that one. My Talmud exactly. So I'm going to ask my Talmud. How do you know to say that each one is strictly limited only to the one that's written by? How do you know that? That only this one is bowl and not that one is bowl. Maybe it means both. Amarava says, Rabba, loylish tamid v'lichter chalas meshucher kicking balloon. So many occasions the Torah had an opportunity to swap it around. If the din is that the chalas you do both steps, and the din is by the kicking the thin wafer you do both steps, then why don't we the Torah ever reverse it and say chalas are meshuchas and the kicking a balloon? Never find that. I mean, the Torah is very particular. This is how it should be done. Kate said, "Key like the key, Vashar Nechel. My kimin key. What's this key? Amar Kana kimi key Yavoni, like the Greek key. What exactly is it? Rashi Xavier says in the page before, key Yavoni looks like the letter Tes, and the Mepharshim can't find any letter now in the Greek alphabet that looks like the letter Tes. Some places Rashi says like the letter Chof, some like the letter Nun, but a lot of times we say the letter X. Tesis here says kimin key. Taisa says Tzayir bekuntus kimin test. If you look on the bottom and next to the last Taisa on the left side, same thing. Taisa says what's key? We find as many times in the Gemara. The Kohen Gadol smell like a key by the king. Tzayir bekuntus. Rashi has a picture. We don't really have the picture. Is kimin test like the letter test? With Perush Chumash Perush Gimel, like gamma. The third letter of that thing. Which is like a half an X. V'yesh mefarshi kimin nun. Looks like the letter nun. Like Kamin Chaf, like a final letter Chaf, because they say Rashi before says that Rashi Ksaviyad, it's like your index finger and your thumb when they're extended like this, which looks like the letter Chaf. Increases will have we had it before in Hayyuz that the king you smear like your minez like a crown, like koinim kimin ki yavanis. Peter, you have to show Aaron the Yoel drips kimin shnei magolius. That's like the letter X. No pictures. They're all talking about pictures there, and they took away our pictures. So we have so many different views as to what exactly is the letter key.
Nun and Chaf be similar, but that's them.
Test is very hard because if you look at the Greek alphabet, I actually looked up this morning, I couldn't find any letter that looks like a test. An X you have, that the word she. In fact, it makes the most sense X because in the Greek alphabet, she is X, and key sounds like chi. I have no idea if I'm right, but I'm just saying it looks like it. Anyway, Tanya Idach, sorry, let's go right. Don't we learn? Mincha b'machzah challah machzah kiki in the mincha that according to Reb Shimon you can do half and half. Half chalos, 5 chalos, and 5 thin wafers. Maybe loy shemitz. What do you do if you follow Reb Shimon? How do you do the oil? Remember, you bring 1 log of oil. You bring a log of oil, the chaytzei, and you have to split it. Now, the part that you mix together, you'll use the whole half a log. The part you put a little bit on top, like the letter X, you can have some excess oil. What happens with that? The chetz of the chalos, the chetz of the kicking. Half you use for the chalos and half you use for the kicking. The chalos is boiling. You mix it all together. The kicking, moishchen, you place on top. You go ahead and you smear the entire top and the entire length of the top. No, our Mishnah says you only do like the letter key, a little bit. Here it says you do the entire top. The Shar Hashemen and the rest of the oil, machzira lechalos. You put it back in and you mix it with the chalos. So you use it. Remember what else you do with it? Rav Shimon Yehuda, Rav Shimon, but he says in Rav Shimon, Moishchen kimin ki, like our Mishnah says. No, you only put a little bit of oil on top. V'hashar Hashemen nechel kainim. They get to keep it. Tanya, another brayz we learned, the kikin above from the atzman. Forget about Rav Shimon's view. The Chachamim, they say you have a choice. The kikin, if you do only the kikin, maybe like shemen, you bring the thin wafers. Only thin wafers. There's a lot of oil then. If you put a little bit on top. This opinion says you put on top and then you do it again. You use the entire shemen. You keep on smearing the surface. It'll be a lot of oil there on top. No, you do like we said in our Mishnah. You put a little bit of oil. The rest are eaten by the kohenim. Have a good day.